Hi everyone, it's me, Krylios, Team Racing Productions MC and producer. And joining me today is Beau Finley. Welcome.
Thanks, Elliot. Thanks.
Hello, Beau. It's so great to have you here. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's such a beautiful day. I'm glad to be here with you.
It is such a beautiful day. It is such a beautiful day. It's May. We love that. It's my favorite month of the year. It means that we are well into spring and summer is right around the corner. And so, with that, of course, what we love to start doing, what we like to start off here on the Team Racing YouTube channel is have our guests introduce themselves to our audience and let them know a little bit about your background and experience. So, let's start with that.
All right. Thanks, Krylios. So my name is Beau Finley, and I'm running to represent Ward 3 on the DC Council. I was born in DC. I grew up attending Blessed Sacrament on Chevy Chase Circle. I graduated from Georgetown Law. My wife and I live in Cleveland Park in an apartment complex called Quebec House, where I've lived for the past 17 years. I've spent most of my career with the federal government, first as an auditor with the Inspector General in the Office of, in the U.S. Department of Transportation. And there I investigated whether there was unlawful coordination among airline companies to favor Orbitz.com, if you remember Orbitz, over Expedia and Travelocity. My biggest responsibility there, though, was as lead analyst for Amtrak's capital program within the Inspector General's office. And at the time, the capital budget was about $1.8 billion. It was rewarding, but a little dense work to do, But yeah, for the past 14 years, I served as an attorney with the Federal Communications Commission. At the FCC, I worked on a wide range of issues, from tackling the scourge of robocalls, you know,
Thank God.
probably got a couple today already, to expanding access to phone and internet service for low-income households through a program called Lifeline, which is a really great program, and then using telecommunication services as a way to help federally recognized Indian tribes use telephone companies as a form of economic development on tribal lands. And over the past 5 years, I was a senior cybersecurity attorney in the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau of the FCC, with a strong focus on 911 reliability. And during my final 3 years at the FCC, I served as vice president of my union chapter, NTEU 209, where I fought for employee rights at the bargaining table. I organized my coworkers. And yeah, and I represented colleagues through the grievance process to obtain justice and dignity for my fellow workers. And then outside of the official jobs, I've also done a fair amount. I've been active in electing Democrats. In 2007, I ran the campaign for Patrick Wyan in College Park, Maryland. He was running to be the first gay man elected to the College Park City Council. We won. He's now the mayor of College Park, and incidentally has endorsed me in this race, which is pretty cool. In 2016, I ran a write-in campaign to be elected to my advisory neighborhood commission. I'm on my third term there now, and was selected by my fellow commissioners to chair ANC 3C. We've done a lot of great work, and I'm proud of my time so far in the ANC. And don't worry, I'm wrapping up. I know this is just a lot, In 2016, it was a busy few years for me, but, I do like being busy. I founded what's called the Blue Wave Committee of the Ward 3 Democrats. And I did this for a couple of reasons. One, to get statehood. We need to teach the importance of DC statehood to Democrats running for office outside of DC. We'll never be able to give ourselves statehood. We're always going to need help from Democrats across the country. Two, yeah, and the second thing was I saw that Democrats have been losing state legislative seats across the country. If we didn't turn the tide, I was concerned Republicans could call a constitutional convention to rewrite the Constitution as how they see fit, which would not be pretty. Our first election was in Virginia in 2017. I targeted 7 seats for us to help flip. We flipped 6 of them. In 2018, I ran to be elected to the DC Democratic State Committee, the DC Democratic Party, with the promise of taking our successful Blue Wave model and bringing it citywide. I was elected along with a few other great Ward 3 Democrats, including Elizabeth Mitchell and Shelley Tompkin. Elizabeth and I continued our Blue Wave work and helped focus DC resources on successful races in Pennsylvania and North Carolina. And 2 of the candidates I worked with, Hala Ayala and David Reed, have endorsed me for this race, which is wonderful. They're both legends in my book. But yeah, so that's sort of me and my portion of qualifications for to represent Ward 3.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I have to say this. Something is happening with my camera where it's not coming on. I don't know what has happened, but we're gonna go through this. I'll just be a disembodied voice while this is going on. So, what I do want to know is what about this season? What about this cycle what was it about it that made you want to throw your hat in the ring and represent the people in, a different way than you have done before?
Well, that's a really great question. Thank you. I'd say I'm running because I'm the best person to move Ward 3 and the district toward being a more resilient, more vibrant, and more just place. I think we're a place where we can thrive, where our children can thrive, and where our grandchildren can thrive. I was one of the last candidates to jump into this race, incidentally. I saw a number of people declare their candidacies and solicit donations without even
Mhm.
having a platform, showing what they believe in and what they want to do, which I found a little frustrating. It kind of hurt, but it's like, how
Mhm.
can voters choose a candidate to be a credible leader if the candidates themselves don't state their values and policy ideas? If you're going to run
Ah,
for office, you should be able to point at what you've done for your community and what you plan to do. So anyhow, I looked at the candidates who had declared. I read the few platforms that existed. No one seemed serious enough in my book about our most pressing questions: affordable housing, climate action, public safety, healthcare, transportation, schools, and racial equity. No one was talking about what we needed to do to secure a thriving DC for future generations. So I talked to my family about this. My wife and I crunched the numbers to see if we had the financial wherewithal for me to quit my
mhm.
job and run for council. We all felt that I could do more good for people, do more good for more people on council. So I filed to run.
I love that. I love that. I love that. So tell me, what are, your top issues, if elected to represent Ward 3 on the Council of the District of Columbia? What would be those, top issues that you would want to tackle?
That's a really tough question because so many of our issues are just interrelated. We need to
Hmm.
build more housing, but that means we need to improve our transit, to
Hmm.
support our housing, and we need to build more schools. Um, you know, we need to we need to end chronic homelessness, which has an effect on housing and how we work with regional partners in Maryland and Virginia. We need to
Hmm.
address climate change, which means doing so in a racially equitable way. And we need to win the war on poverty. And that means strengthening our schools, building more housing, and providing better, more reliable transportation options. And so, in the end, wrapping all together, I'd say my campaign is based on human dignity. We all deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, right? But what does that mean? It means that we should not have to fear whether we have a roof over our heads, or if we can afford to have a roof over our heads. It means accessing healthcare without having to worry about whether we can afford it. It means working for a livable wage in a safe, fair workplace. It means
Hmm.
that we all have the opportunity to receive the best education the district can offer. And so when that idea of dignity, being able to walk down the street and not fear violence, it means that if we fall, our city is there to help us back up, and that's what
Yes.
I'm all about. And so specific issues, we have to create more affordable housing. I believe housing is a human right. We're facing an affordable housing crisis right now, the likes of which we've not seen in the modern era. If you see my signs around Ward 3, they say affordable housing for all, which is at the basis of making sure people have the dignity of having a roof over their head. To fully tackle our housing crisis, we've got this housing production toolbox, but it's not doing enough right now. So we need to expand it. We need to be creative. We need to think outside of the box. Pardon that, the reference. But I just couldn't resist. But yeah, so to that end, I think we need to use the Housing Production Trust Fund, which is the primary tool we use to help developers build more affordable housing. We need to use that to purchase current and proposed inclusionary zoning units to make them available to households at or below 30% of median family income. Montgomery County does this, and they do it very successfully. I think we should, steal their model and help house our most vulnerable people. I want to expand rent stabilization. DC rent control law only touches upon buildings built before 1976. And unless you
Mm.
have a time machine, Krylios, we're not going to be able to build more buildings prior to 1976.
Yeah.
So we're losing that housing stock. I think we're down to about 50% or so of what we had when rent control went into effect. Uh, so I'd like to extend rent stabilization to buildings built more than 15 years ago. Uh,
Hmm.
Rent stabilized housing, you may know, provides below market rate rental opportunities for workforce housing, uh, for someone like me and my wife. We live in a rent stabilized building, and if elected, I'd be the only renter on council.
Wow.
Yeah, in a city where it's something like 55% renters, that's a little scary that we don't have representation yet. But yeah, so going back to other tools, I'd like to invest in social housing. Social housing is really interesting. It's where 1/3 is deeply affordable, from 0% to 30% of area median income. 1/3 is affordable, just regular affordable, yeah, from 30% to 80% of area median income. And then 1/3 is market rate. And this market rate helps, cover the expenses of the other 2/3. It's been a successful model in world-class cities like Singapore, Vienna, and even Boston. So I think we could incorporate it here too. If I don't know if you follow what's going on with the Wardman Hotel down in Woodley Park, but there's a proposal to build a 900 unit building, of which
Yeah.
only 72 units will be affordable, and they'll only be affordable at sort of the 60 to 80% range, which is of income, which is kind of high, and it doesn't really address our deeply affordable housing crisis. So if we had social housing, though, of those 900 units, 600 of them will be affordable. So the only way we can really aggressively combat our housing crisis and our affordable housing crisis is to look seriously at social housing and perhaps create a model that the rest of the country can follow. I'd also like DC to build a housing portfolio. And this is something I've talked to friends who are fierce housing advocates and agree with this, is that DC should use its powers under the District Opportunity to Purchase Act to build up a portfolio of current apartment buildings from which it can use the net revenues to build or procure more housing. And I think that would be a good income generator. Make sure we manage the buildings appropriately, and then use the profits beyond capital upkeep to invest in more housing. And finally, this is kind of the boring stuff. I think we should use tax credits to incentivize the building of affordable housing. We need a district level equivalent of the low income housing tax credit. Currently, it's called the LIHTC. It gives an incentive to build more affordable housing. I think if we had one focused in Ward 3, it would be even better. So that's housing. That's a big topic, major issue. But we also have to deal with crime, right? All of us deserve to be safe, and public safety has to be a priority. I spent the last 5 years, as I mentioned earlier, in the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau at the FCC, working on issues involving 911. In the district, we're in the midst of re-examining our policing. This is a necessary step in improving our policing and reducing crime. We need a data-driven approach, and I think we should treat violence through a public health lens, which Attorney General Karl Racine has done a good job talking about and incorporating in his office. Our police have not yet moved to that, but I think we can. I'd like to have our police move to a community-oriented policing model, and I was very proud to be one of the first candidates in Ward 3 to say this, and numerous other candidates have jumped on board.
I've said it now, yeah.
Yeah, it's great. I'm really glad to hear my fellow candidates liking some of my policy proposals. But our police are on patrol about 22% of the time, and the national average for cities our size is 33%. So that's 50% more than what our police are patrolling. So we need to get our police back on the streets, walking around, walking through neighborhoods, knowing who's in the neighborhoods, being able to talk to people, being approachable. And our police being in neighborhoods will mean our response times will be quicker, because police won't have to, drive out from Idaho Avenue in DC and Upper Northwest to go across, because they'll already be in the neighborhood talking to neighbors and making sure things are going well. On the other side of things, I support sort of giving the police more time to do police work by hiring more violence interrupters and hiring credible messengers as violence interrupters. Folks, and then when folks call 911, they call for a variety of reasons, right? It could be a personal, somebody in your household having an emergency. It could be you see somebody on the street having like a mental health crisis. And in that situation, I think the police should respond, but shouldn't have to be the ones who help the person through that crisis, because they're not trained for it. And so we need to have mental health specialists who come with a co-response with police, so the police can show up, make sure everything's safe, and then go back to police work. I think that would be a really great way to sort of diffuse some of the situations that we're concerned about and that popped up in the Police Reform Commission's report. Now, and regarding public safety, this is all short term, right? We need to think long term too. We need to have a vision of what our city looks like 50 years from now, and what is our utopia? And that means we need to fight poverty. Poverty is fundamentally the root cause of crime. Over the past 2 years, we've seen millions of job losses across the country. At the same time, we've seen a rise in crime. And people keep saying, well, what could possibly be causing that crime? Every time we see a spike in poverty, we see a spike in crime. So, the relationship is clear. So we need to address poverty. How do we do that? We have to tackle the housing crisis. I keep coming back to housing. We need to end housing insecurity. We need to make sure we have reliable and trusted healthcare access. So folks don't have to make the choice of whether to get healthcare or not. We need to really fight poverty at a serious level. We need to work to close the school to prison pipelines, right? We need to invest back in communities that we've disinvested from. We need to provide proper at-risk youth funding for our schools. We need to have a stable pool of money for that, a pool of teacher and mental health and social worker resources for at-risk students. We need to provide wraparound services for low-income households at our schools. We need to keep our school security contract focused on students' well-being. So that's it for sort of the public safety priority of my campaign. And another issue would be healthcare. Healthcare, like housing, like being safe, is a human right. And until we get to single-payer healthcare in our country, we're going to have to fight for access to healthcare at the bargaining table if you're unionized and at the ballot box if you're not. Healthcare is also sadly an unaffordable luxury for most, which is part of why we have 24,000 uninsured residents across the district, most of whom are Black and brown. If we truly care about equity, dignity, and family, we have to fully fund and implement the Birth to Three Act. I think our values are there and we want to. We just need to actually do it. We've had funding for a couple of years, but we need to have dedicated funding moving forward. On that aside, I've got several common sense, I'd call them, tweaks, progressive tweaks to ensure low-cost healthcare is easy to access. One of those would be to cap hospital and prescription costs. We should follow other states that do this. It's shown that if you get a committee looks at costs beyond what was agreed to in the insurance market with the state, they make cuts accordingly, and it results in lower prices to residents. So I think we should look seriously at that in DC. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to cut costs in healthcare for DC residents, especially low-income DC residents, and for whatever reason, we're just not focused on that right now, and it's something that we need to focus on. We can look to reinsurance for lower insurance premiums. I think 14 other states have what's called reinsurance, and it's a strange financial transaction, but a reinsurance program could save the DC HealthLink participants 5 to 15% in health insurance premiums. So those are the folks who aren't getting employer care. If you're having a self-insure through the DC Health Exchange, your costs could go down if we participate in insurance programs. But we should establish tax credits for high out-of-pocket costs. Like if you've been hospitalized, you get that bill and you're like, how am I ever going to pay this? Well, a tax credit would go a long way to helping you alleviate yourself of that financial burden. We need to subsidize out-of-pocket costs for patients with high deductibles through tax credits. I think it would be a really good way to make sure people don't choose not to get health care because of the cost. So we help them on the back end.
Yeah.
And then we've got with the the American Rescue Plan has a subsidy. So Congress tied the cost of health insurance premiums to 8 to 9% of household income, up to about 400% of the federal poverty guidelines. That's a lot of numbers. What does that mean? That means that if you are in a low-income household, your health insurance should not cost more than 8 or 9% of your income. But health insurance premiums have obviously skyrocketed, and the federal government has protected us from those skyrocketing premiums through subsidies. The problem is the American Rescue Plan, which was the latest stopgap measure against the catastrophe, expires later this year. So we need to look at using local funds to help many, it's mostly older residents, bridge this gap to pay for their health insurance premiums. It's folks who are sort of right before Medicare age is who it mostly affects. And then finally, we need to make sure healthcare is accessible for our LGBTQ community, especially our seniors. I'd like to see the Mayor's Office of LGBTQ Affairs have a full-time healthcare coordinator to address healthcare issues among our LGBTQ seniors, primarily because, especially when a partner has died, we see this, across sexual identity. When a partner dies, a person stops necessarily taking care of themselves. It's sad, And when you are discriminated against because of your sexual identity and because of your gender, you end up having much more barriers to healthcare. And so we need to have our doctors and nurses be culturally competent and to make sure that healthcare is provided at a level commensurate with non-LGBTQ folks. We see this discrimination and how it has atrocious effects long-term on health outcomes, especially among LGBTQ seniors. So we need to work on that. I'd like to see cultural competence training for nurses and doctors, and I think that would go a long way to helping, as well as having a healthcare coordinator who can help navigate the incredible complexity of our healthcare system for our LGBTQ seniors.
So thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing, Beau.
That's a mouthful. I'm sorry, Krylios. You asked for a couple issues, and I just gave you a book of 3.
Well, thanks for that. I do want to remind our viewers about the deadlines and the dates coming up for the election. So the Board of Election begins sending mail-in ballots to all registered voters May 16th. And if no one has noticed, we're in May now. So those deadlines are coming up. And the deadline to update your voter registration with party affiliation is May 31st. And you've got to do that to get ready for the primary election day on June 21st, 2022. So to make sure that you are vote ready, please visit headcount.org to pledge to vote, check your status, and register to vote. Once again, go to headcount.org to do so. One last thing I'll ask you, Beau, is this: why are you the best choice for voters come this election season?
Is this really my last question? So, well, I think Ward 3 needs someone who's passionate, thoughtful, and can conduct vigorous oversight. It needs an independent voice, someone who hasn't worked for this mayor or the last one. Ward 3 needs someone like me with demonstrated democratic values and deep roots in the community. If I'm going back to others' platforms, I'm somehow the only candidate with a platform on racial equity. I'm the only candidate with a platform on protecting LGBTQ rights. I'm the only candidate with a pro-labor platform. It's just blows my mind. And until a couple of weeks ago, I was the only candidate with a climate change platform. We're in the middle of a climate crisis. If you're running for office and you don't have a climate change platform, you should not be running for office. I believe we should elect leaders with experience and vision and empathy, or thinking long term, and who will fight for all of us. And I really think I'm that candidate. So if you want to get involved with my campaign as a volunteer, we're knocking doors, we're doing meet and greets, we're handing out literature as fast as we can print it. Please go to beaufinley.com, BeauFinley.com, and get in touch with us. We'd love to.
We have it on the screen, because I was just going to ask you, how can people, find out more about your campaign, get in touch, volunteer, donate, or, to just keep up with everything that you are doing?
So those links and email address and the phone number there, feel free to call me, feel free to email me. You can get at me on Twitter if you want. We can have a discussion. But yeah, to volunteer for this campaign, as I mentioned, this campaign's based on dignity and justice. Just click our link, go to beaufinley.com and sign up. We've got a small army, and we'd love to have you aboard.
Perfect. And viewers, we are going to have those links in the description below. So you can go ahead right now and check out everything that Beau Finley and the Beau Finley campaign has to offer. And go ahead, support, donate, call, do everything that you want. That link will be in the description. Mr. Finley, thank you so much for joining me today. It has been such a pleasure getting to chat with you, getting to pick your brain a little bit, and, find out more about why you want to represent Ward 3 in the Council of the District of Columbia. So thank you so much for being with me today. As I said, certainly a pleasure, and I wish you the best of luck on your campaign.
Thank you, Krylios. It was great to be on this. Thank you.
Awesome. And those watching, please follow Team Racine Productions at Team Racine on all forms of social media. Click around our YouTube channel, see what we have. We've got interviews, vlogs, forums, all of that. Like, comment, and subscribe. But most of all, thank you for watching Bye, everyone.